your name, to consider your great love for sinners and your work of redemption for us. Send your Holy Spirit through the Scriptures, which proclaim your love, that our trust in you might be strengthened. Amen. All right, we are at the point where Jesus is before Pontius Pilate. If you look at page 1, quick rundown. The Jews, the big entourage of Jews, the Sanhedrin, the temple guards, perhaps some other Jewish followers, all take Jesus. He's bound by the temple guards, and they're taking him before Pontius Pilate, who is the Roman governor, who is at the Antonia fortress in the place called the Praetorium. They take him over there, and on page 1 we ran through the list of questions that they didn't want to go inside because they didn't want to be ceremonially unclean, because there'd be yeast in there, and they're celebrating the Passover, and you don't want to break God's law, right, by going in a Gentile home where that. Hi, welcome back.
Thank you.
Where that would be the case, and so you would be unclean and not be able to celebrate the many dinners that they had in relation to the Passover and the Feast of Weeks, which was all jammed together. So if you're confused and you say, wait, Jesus already celebrated the Passover, the Jews would have celebrated the Passover the night before, so what's this about that they didn't all get to think of the Passover? It's because it was a week-long festival and there are lots of meals, and if you're unclean, you can't join with everybody else. So they're very concerned about that. On the other hand, what's ironic about that? Yeah, false witnesses, they're lying about this guy, this prisoner that they have. They want to put an innocent man to death. That's fine, but you don't want to be unclean, for the Passover. Craziness. We're going to see more of that today. We're going to talk about how slimy, sneaky, disgusting, weaselly they are. We may have not said weaselly before, but they are. So basically, what's their thinking? Just in general, as they're bringing Jesus to Pilate, what's their thinking? What's their expectation? That he'll listen to them and do what they want. And that was shown how? What's that? Yeah, if he wasn't guilty, we wouldn't have brought him to you. Of course he's guilty. You should just condemn him to die.
We say so.
Yeah. And, again, flowing robes, the most austere, prestigious group, ruling group among the Jews is there in force. It's an impressive display. There's this high degree of expectation that they're placing on Pontius Pilate. His two jobs are to collect taxes and keep the peace, right? That's the Roman governor's job. You don't want to get everybody upset in the Jewish community with all the rulers, so you want to keep the peace, and so you can keep your position as the ruler in that area. So they just expect him to do whatever they ask him to do, but Pilate is not going to be the executioner where he's not also the judge. So he's going to check this out. Therefore, we have the accounts of Jesus before Pontius Pilate answering questions or not as we're going through. Yes?
Old Testament law, there was a way for Israel to put people to death. Now, when the Romans superimposed on this, did the Romans mandate that only they could execute someone?
Yes, that's exactly right. So the Jews, according to the Old Testament, could put someone to death for certain things by stoning. But yes, the Romans said, no, death penalty is ours. You're not allowed to do that. And that's why you have that comment by them, but we're not allowed to execute anyone. Therefore, we have to bring him to you to get this done. Yeah. So, so that's the bottom of the page, actually, on page 1. The Jewish way of putting someone to death was stoning. Roman way of putting someone to death was crucifixion. We looked at this a little bit, just looking at what Jesus said about his death, that he was going to be lifted up. And so Jesus was foreseeing a death of crucifixion, not of stoning. And then you have all the messianic prophecies, the Psalms and such, that talk about his bones not being broken, his side being pierced, the onlookers casting lots for his clothing, all the things that happened at the crucifixion. So God, through his prophets, always saw crucifixion. Jesus saw crucifixion, and we talked a little bit about this last time. I wonder what the Jews what was going through their minds as Jesus is talking like this, and they're wanting the Romans to put him to death. It's not going to be stoning, but it seems that a lot of them never pieced it together that the description of the prophets is crucifixion, and that they would be the Messiah and crucifixion coming together. They were just looking to get him killed. We talked about how their unbelief blinded them, and how they were just so driven to get him executed and out of their way that they weren't piecing it together. So that was the bottom of page 1. So turn to 2. We only answered the first one last time at the top of the page. This is really our pickup point, Luke 23, verse 2. And they began to accuse him. Okay, so, now, wait. So they say, we have no right to execute anyone. Pilate doesn't want to do this, and so then this happens. They began to accuse him, saying, we have found this man subverting our nation. He opposes payment of taxes to Caesar and claims to be Christ the King. So they're getting nowhere with the Roman governor, so they've got to convince him somehow to take action, to do what they want. They weren't letting it go. They start accusing him of things. We talked about subverting the nation, and there was one point I wanted you to pick up from this. I don't know if you remember it or not. When they say subverting the nation, did you jot anything down, or do you remember anything? I don't want to say too much.
They didn't say how he was doing this.
Yes, that's the thing. They offer no evidence. There's no proof. There's nothing. They just say, yeah, he's trying to topple Roman rule. Okay, but Pilate's smarter than that.
So that everywhere he goes, he gathers crowds, and this could worry Pilate, and so they bring this up.
Yes, but they conveniently don't say anything.
Right.
This is their weaselly way. They just leave it up to Pilate's imagination because they don't have any evidence, and they don't even bring that up. They just want him to accept what they're saying with no proof. And again, we talked about his job being to keep the peace, so you don't want somebody subverting the nation. You don't want somebody trying to topple Roman rule, Pontius Pilate, so, you got to take care of this guy.
So they implicitly provided that with taking the cohort to the garden, with the huge amount of people that went before Pilate.
Yes.
That's the implicit.
Yes. They try to make him appear like a very dangerous criminal. But again, it's just the appearance. And it's just the throw it out there, this accusation. They offer nothing behind it. Nothing that somebody judging a case could use. So let's talk about the second one, because Gisela wanted to do this last time, and we weren't there yet. We were on number 1.
Yeah.
So we're going to give Gisela first shot, if she wants it still today. Opposing taxes to Caesar, they throw out there too.
Well, that's not true.
So what were you
Because
thinking?
he said, he was asked when they were testing him, and then he said, give to Caesar which is Caesar's and to God which is God.
Yeah.
So he didn't oppose it.
Yeah.
That's out loud.
This is the opposite of what Jesus did.
Right.
Yeah. So again, no proof. What else would you say about this accusation? Yeah?
When they asked Jesus that question, they were expecting an answer of one way or the other, not both. And so they were prepared as planned to say he's either saying that he's better than the government by saying he's Christ the King, or he is trying to avoid taxes.
And yet he didn't give in to him, right?
Yeah.
He gives the smartest and perfect answer so that they got nothing. And so they walked away from that with nothing, and yet they come with this accusation. So what else? Think a little deeper about this. Steph?
Would Pilate not know if taxes were not being collected? If there was a general uproar about taxes?
Correct. And we'll come back to that in a minute also.
I mean, I'm thinking if it's Pilate's job to collect taxes, if they throw this out there, maybe it'll just trigger something in Pilate. He'll go off and say, well, condemn him then.
Yeah, so again, they're hoping that Pilate concocts a bunch of evidence in his head that will allow him to condemn this man. There's one more aspect of it. John?
Well, it's his job to collect taxes, and if the taxes aren't being collected,
Right, it would be a terrible thing.
thing against him.
Right, so they're hoping that he latches onto that. Who's, Jeffrey?
Opposing taxes to Caesar, if he's the one that's supposed to keep the peace and collect taxes, wouldn't that antagonize him into some sort of reaction?
This is their hope. This is their hope. Think about who's telling Pilate about the tax issue.
I didn't get a chance to.
It's a simple question. Who's telling him? The Pharisees, the Jewish people, right? This does not strike you as odd.
Who didn't want to pay taxes?
They didn't want to pay taxes. They didn't care. Why would they be the ones saying, oh yeah, he doesn't like paying taxes to you, like we all do? This is bizarre. They're grasping for anything they can latch onto. But they had no interest in paying taxes to the Romans. They hated it. How did they treat the tax collectors? Really badly. They ostracized them, right? Don't hang out with them. They gave Jesus a hard time for being around them. Tax collectors were horrible. Why? Because they cheated and they, well, not only taxes, but they took extra, and the Romans let that go. They were not happy about the tax situation. It's one of the reasons they wanted the Romans out. It's one of the reasons in their confusion and unbelief, they were looking for a Messiah who would topple Roman rule and give them their country back, and they didn't have to do that. So, yeah, really honest of them, right? Oh yeah, he doesn't like to pay the taxes. But we like to pay the taxes. This is ridiculous. This is what? Weasels. Claiming to be an anointed king. Okay. You notice that it says, and claims to be Christ a king. But I put claiming to be an anointed king. That's because that's a better translation. Tell me why that, well, you're not looking at the Greek, but tell me the difference between those two.
Well, anointed by whom? By God.
We're getting some, you asked me a question, I was looking for an answer. So I'll just hold off.
Okay.
When the Jews wanted to be an anointed king by God, but Pilate didn't care about that because he didn't believe in that kind of stuff.
Yes. Technically, the translation is better, claiming to be an anointed king.
That's a recognized king.
Yes, it's somebody who's recognized, who's been
Installed.
set apart as the king, that somebody did this. Does he care? It looks like the title, right? To be Christ, a king. It just says an anointed king. We know that Christ means anointed one, and it looks like a title, but it's not really the way it is. And as Sandy points out, what does he care? What does he care if he is their spiritual leader, their spiritual Messiah?
Just another God.
Yeah, it's just another God. You know, he would have some concern. Why? Well, yeah, that's the big part. But as far as the God thing goes, who's God? Caesar is God, right? But they tolerated, as long as it was peaceful and the taxes came in, they tolerated the other religions in the realm. And so if he's their spiritual Messiah and he's supposed to take away their sins and open heaven for, that's what they believe. No sweat off his back. He doesn't care. Not interested. Not his problem. Jeffrey.
Is there a king of the Romans, or is it just like a governor?
Caesar would be the ultimate king, but they also used king for other, like Herod in Matthew's gospel, he's called a king. It's kind of common term by the people.
I guess with 1 and 2, I could use leaving this definition of kingship in another direction. Okay, to me, I look at king, well, yeah, he's taken him away from Rome, and yeah, he's not gonna want taxes paid to Caesar. I guess I tend to politize this and outline king, therefore no taxes, therefore no taxes. Seems like they have a purpose for putting those first 2 in front of this last one. It's leading up to, yeah, this anointed king,
Yeah.
it's more than just a spiritual God. He's gonna take us out of your way.
That's right. Except they don't really give evidence of it, right? Again, you're exactly right. But I'm just noticing how they just don't say much. They just say enough. They want Pilate's imagination to run wild. They mean, when they talk about the anointed king, who are they talking about as Jews? They're talking about the Messiah. That's technically correct, and that's what they're thinking. But they're implying something totally different. They're implying what Jim just said. They're implying an earthly king who's taken away the taxes and trying to topple Rome. They're implying something else, even though they know, in their way of speaking, this is something else.
I know it's always dangerous to extrapolate out of Scripture. Are they relying possibly on the fact that he said nothing, that Jesus said nothing to them in his defense when he was before them? Possibly counting on that also when he goes before Pilate. He will say nothing. What they present as evidence will simply stand off to the cross with God.
Yes, that's what they want. That's what they want. They want to be able to just say enough, say the right things that would be necessary to get what they want. And that's to have him executed out of their hair. Remember way back when they talked about they didn't want to lose their positions? And they were afraid of that with him. So yeah, they just want this to run through quickly, smoothly. So they throw out the most grievous things that they can think of for Pilate as the Roman ruler. Jeffrey?
Why do they hate Jesus? Because he's doing miracles and drawing crowds and preaching something that they are not used to? Is that why they hate him?
All of that, and some of them were concerned about their power and their position, we're told in the Gospels. Yeah. But finally, what it comes down to, Jeffrey, is unbelief. They just rejected him as the Messiah. They did not see him as fulfilling the prophecies about the Messiah. Some of them did. Some of them did, but by and large, they didn't.
They still don't.
Yeah.
A footnote to what Jeff was saying. That second part, that Pilate was in charge of keeping the peace, when he saw the appeal that Jesus had and how the crowds were being attracted to him, he probably thought, hey, I'm going to be held accountable if I don't keep the peace down here. So all the more reason maybe for him to like put a lid on this as quickly as possible.
He was already
Yeah.
in Syria, that wasn't a very good place.
Yeah, that's what they want. So, and take a look at, we're kind of working toward this last question. Why would Pilate have ignored the first 2 charges? And we may have mentioned it, but just to nail it down. Why would he have ignored the charge subverting the nation and opposing taxes to Caesar? Right?
He would have known that was not true.
Yeah, he would have known that. Do you think he would not have known that? Do you think there were not people out there that would have told him, hey, this guy's opposing your rule. This guy is whipping up the crowds and he's talking about overthrowing Roman rule. Do you think Pilate wouldn't have known that? Of course he would have known that. Do you think that if the taxes weren't coming in, he wouldn't have noticed? They had a whole tax collecting system that involved the Jewish people. Do you think that wouldn't have come back? He doesn't even address them. That he would have known. Gotcha.
You may have also had feedback from the garrison went out on Monday, Thursday to arrest him, that this was a peaceful event.
Yeah, that could be too.
He is the commander, he's in charge of the garrison of soldiers.
That's true. Remember, we talked about the term that's used is a whole cohort. That's a lot of soldiers that went out there. Somebody, the one in charge, would have reported something about the event. There's nothing going on. They're hanging out in the garden. There's nothing happening. So they brought him in. So maybe. Lori?
But when you bring in the word king, and you think of all these Caesars and how paranoid every single one of them are,
Mm-hmm.
and Pilate knows his head could roll from, if there was a king that he allowed to
Right.
exist.
And so that's the one he's going to investigate. And so that's the account you're used to hearing on Christ the King Sunday, at the end of the church year sometimes, and then typically during Lent, of course. You're used to hearing that account of Jesus before Pilate that we're going to look into now, and the charge that he's a king. So we're there, John 18. Pilate went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea," Jesus asked, "or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "It was your people and your chief priests who handed you over to me. What is it you have done?" Jesus said, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jews. But now my kingdom is from another place." "You are a king then," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You are right in saying I am a king. In fact, for this reason I was born, and for this reason, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" Pilate asked. With this he went out again to the Jews and said, "I find no basis for a charge against him." Yeah.
So you have a politician saying, what is truth? They're so used to lying.
That is kind of funny. I didn't think about that. So the note there says Jesus is handed over and is now a prisoner of the state, right? Before the Jews have him, he's gone against whatever rules they think that he's gone against. They bring him to the Roman governor. They throw out these accusations. One of them sort of sticks, at least enough to get his attention and to bring him before Pilate to be judged. And so he's a prisoner of the state. How do you understand Jesus' question back to the governor? Just take the whole setting in, and how do you take his response? Is that your own idea or others talk to you about? Okay.
Kind of fishing for an answer.
Okay. What else?
Smart.
What's that?
Well, he was smart. He was, he wanted Pilate to think about it too. You know, that, did you come up with it or they gave you that idea?
Okay.
And I like, he's just pretty wise in what he said.
All right. Great.
He's not going to deny being a king, but he's also not going to say anything to remove himself from the situation that he knows is God's will.
Yeah, this is kind of interesting, right? We've done this along the way. How does Jesus think? True God, true man, knowing he's fulfilling prophecy. Anything else?
He could be looking to convert Pilate.
Yes.
I mean, why would he want to even go into that if he didn't want Pilate to think about what the king of the Jews meant?
Yeah, you wonder if that's there. If he's searching out where Pilate is. Kathy?
Just that he's speaking truth the whole time. He just speaks the truth, and that truth could convert.
Yeah.
It's just plain and simple.
Yeah. So he wants to. Bob, was that him?
Oh, I was thinking, it would go back to what we've just been saying. Have you already heard about this, or from my actions, have you seen any of this come up to you, or is somebody feeding you this?
Yeah. Just personally, where are you at? This is a little unusual, don't you think? Somebody who's on the spot before the Roman governor, death penalty on the line, and he starts asking the governor questions.
Yeah, I thought that was
Yeah, I think that's what was behind you saying that's kind of wise, right?
Yeah, but other people wouldn't do it. You'd be scared.
It seems unlikely. It's different. It seems different. I don't I don't think, well, I'm pretty certain you can't charge him with being disrespectful of the authority. It seems an honest, like you were saying, truthful kind of question, just inquiring, did you come up with this? Have you heard something about me? And then he talks about his kingdom and truth. So yes, Jesus is a king, but not the kind Pilate had to be concerned about. He was not a king that would rival Caesar, but a king of hearts and truth. And so the verdict is, Jesus is innocent. Right? There's no basis for charging this guy.
I think it's interesting, I don't know if it's common, that Pilate took him into the palace and talked to him seemingly very reasonably. I mean, he sort of man to man, I thought, rather than this, you know, he seemed to want an answer and was listening to what he said.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting to think about Pilate's role in relation to the Jewish people and how he, at least he's not just taking their word for it and just kind of chickening out, doing what they want because this is impressive display of power and, among the Jewish people, and it could upset his rule there. He takes it seriously. He's going to go through the process of judging him properly.
Was he considered a fair man? Do we know much about Pilate?
I don't know much else. The question was he a fair man? But I don't know outside of Scripture that we have an account, right?
He was already in trouble for 2 incidents that happened in Palestine under his watch. One involved the killing of some people, Jewish people.
Right.
And the trouble with the standards that they had brought in. And so he was trying to be careful. And eventually he did get called back to Rome because of some of the errors that he made there in Judea and Palestine.
So, most of what we have is biblical, correct, on Pilate? Because wasn't there not controversy over whether he existed for quite a long time?
Right, but we do have things from
Josephus, yeah. But outside of that, a lot of people have questioned whether he, like, you couldn't find, and then they found an inscription with his title, and so then they said, oh, this guy did exist. So I think people have been hesitant to give Josephus the credit and, you know, pairing his with the Scripture. But that's the accounts that we have, though. There's nothing else, though, I don't believe.
I think it's interesting that Luther, for the Catechism, used the same system of asking questions and then the answer. So it's really a way to teach people.
Sure.
And that's what Jesus.
Sure. Yeah, and I think if you look at Jesus questioning that way, it's not dissimilar to the way he treated all of the different religious groups on Tuesday, giving them another opportunity. Here he is before the Roman governor, giving him an opportunity to see what he knew about him, if he believed anything about him, and told him a couple things. DJ?
It's clear pulling him aside that he wasn't looking to condemn an innocent man.
Right.
He wanted to pull him aside so he could talk to him privately, because there's no way that the crowd was going to have a conversation with Jesus with the crowd there.
Right.
They were going to interject and throw whatever they wanted to manipulate whatever conversation happened.
Yeah, so this seems very fair. And Nancy, to your question, we're going to continue to see Pilate and what he does. And so there'll be another question in here, too, about why he does what he does as far as sending him to Herod. And so we'll get a chance to address that again. Yep.
With Jesus' omniscient attribute that he had, he knew before Pilate even started questioning him what he was going to be asking him. And what he was saying here almost was, slow down, Pilate. Stop and think about the information that you have. And you don't have to ask those questions.
Perhaps. Or did he willingly push aside his omniscience at that moment and just allow this to go forward?
Because it had to happen.
Right. So again, trying to figure out what was in Jesus' head, true God, true man, it's difficult. Okay.
I kind of wonder if Pilate knew that they were trying to put one over on him and kind of thinking, these guys are full of baloney. I'm going to go talk to Jesus and see what he has to say.
maybe. His interactions, I mean, certainly he interacted with them all the time. They had to come to him for certain things like death penalty. Yeah.
But we know Jesus wasn't trying to get out of it,
No,
so maybe he really was trying to preach to Pilate and to move his heart.
I prefer to look at it that way, especially, you know, since a couple days earlier, he's trying to do that very thing with all of the people who are condemning him. DJ?
I would say, knowing that the first two accusations are most likely false, we would be questionable about the third accusation as well. So that would make you a little curious about what their motivations are and what's going on.
Yeah, so anyway, I see Pilate as just carrying out his duty faithfully. He just doesn't take their word for it. They're weasels. We can see that in their approach. He actually does his job. And we'll see if that continues. Mark 15. The chief priests accused him of many things. So again, Pilate asked him, aren't you going to answer? See how many things they're accusing you of. But Jesus still made no reply, and Pilate was amazed. Why would Jesus not respond?
Anything?
Yeah?
Maybe in front of that crowd, he don't want to be heard. Yelling over him,
Yeah, is there any chance that anything he said would get by them? I mean, why can't he trust them, the crowd? Because they're not trustworthy. Because they've already thrown all sorts of, you know, false stuff.
He wasn't trying to get out, I mean, he knew what was going to happen and that this was the time, so he wasn't trying to get out of it by defending himself. He knew that this was the way it had to be.
Mm-hmm. There's at least another answer to this.
They're weasels.
And, yes, if we've learned nothing else today.
Didn't Isaiah say he was going to be led to?
Like a sheep before a shearers is silent. Yes, that comes to mind, and it's going to come to mind again. So yes, prophecy being fulfilled.
I think we need to remember, these high priests, they were the leaders of Jewish people. They were probably some of the cream of their society.
They were.
And essentially, Jesus, who came to them, they didn't recognize him, and so they became antagonistic to the guy who's saying that he knows more than they do along the way. So they've come to this after 3 years, they decided they were going to destroy him.
Yeah, what chance does he have? Why else does he not need to say anything?
Well, I'm not sure if this is the answer to that, but when they throw out all this stuff that's so untrue and so bogus as weasels, where do you start to refute it? Because it's not true.
It's
so
pointless,
you don't
right?
have to.
Right,
Yeah.
because it's not true. There's nothing
There's
to
nothing
defend.
Yeah.
Steph?
Pilate already didn't think he was guilty.
There you go. He's already been declared innocent. Pilate, the Roman governor's already walked out and said the guy's innocent. They start hurling other things. He's got nothing to say. Nothing they say is true. He's already declared himself innocent. What would the point be? There's no point.
And as far as changing their hearts, maybe he knew it was a pearls to swine situation.
The way the week has gone and all the opportunities he's given, teaching in the temple early in the week, addressing them directly on Tuesday, they're not listening. He's given them all the chance. Yeah, there's no reason for him to be answering anything at this point.
At this point, is there anything to his divine nature knowing this has to take place? And he's saying, well, you know, just let it go. I mean, this is what we plan to do.
Yeah.
I don't know how that
Again,
that would have worked with him.
The way that worked in his mind is, you know, we're guessing, but it's part of the picture, right?
If you back up a little bit, Jesus did come into Jerusalem on Palm Sunday, just a matter of 6 days prior to that. And Pilate had some recognition of what's happening in the city. He may have remembered that, as this guy does attract attention.
Right.
Whether or not he's a risk to me, I don't know.
But he does his due diligence to find out.
Right.
Right?
He's smart enough to go back in the calm to his office and say, you know, who is this guy that brought, that people were cheering on the way up?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, why does he end up marveling at him, do you think?
It's not the normal response.
This is not the normal response. What are you going to do if you're on trial for your life? And they're throwing out accusations against you that are untrue. What are you going to say?
I'm innocent.
It's not true. I'm innocent. I didn't do that. You would defend yourself.
Standpoint that Pilate came from Rome, where he probably exposed a lot of very smart people. And now he comes over here, and he's supposedly one of the smart people, and here he meets Jesus, who's probably, he recognizes he's just as smart as he is, if not more, so he probably showing his respect.
Perhaps, yeah. This is not the normal way it played out anyway, enough that the governor's going, wow, this is something very different.
How others look at that, I just marvel and humbled by the path Jesus takes through this to the cross. He's knowing he's headed to one of the most excruciating and painful deaths invented by mankind up until this date. He's calm, he's focused. He takes the time. I look at this Pilate interaction. He's attempting to witness to him.
Right.
This is standard apologetics. He's got a point of contact. He's using it to ask questions to lead Pilate possibly to the truth. When Pilate doesn't finish going there, okay, that's Pilate. But even in the midst of all this, he's demonstrating calmness, love, compassion, all these aberrant people en route to the cross. He still took time for them. I find this humbling.
Yeah. Yeah, right to the end. He behaves this way. So this is remarkable to Pilate. It's not what he's accustomed to seeing. This is not the normal. He sees the difference between the group, the mob that's brought him there, and the man who stands before him, and there's a marked difference between them.
Can't help but wonder if he's thinking, when Jesus says that my kingdom is from another place, he's not thinking, wow, it's kind of a kingdom. What kind of kingdom would he have if he acts this way?
Well, I think he recognized that from Pilate's perspective, he's seeing this as a philosophical king. Spiritual maybe in regard to the Jews or this man's opinion, but for Pilate, this is a philosophical thing. This is not a real king in a throne, looking to take over the land. So, it continues. Let's get a little bit more in. But they insisted, so they just keep going. They won't stop. He stirs up the people all over Judea by his teaching. He started in Galilee and has come all the way here. On hearing this, Pilate asked if the man was a Galilean. When he learned that Jesus was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who was also in Jerusalem at that time. So, what should Pilate have done, do you think?
Told the Jews to go home.
Told the Jews to go home, acquitted Jesus, let him go. That's one opinion, right? That's one opinion.
If he looked at the jurisdictional issue, he should have turned Jesus over to Herod.
So,
in the beginning, and this is your problem.
Well, he didn't know. He didn't know. He's finding out, right now. And so, but you raise the second point. Is he now doing the proper thing? Is this an honest guy, as far as his job is concerned, saying, oh, you know what? He really does need to see Herod. He's from up in his turf. Herod's in town. He really needs to see him. This is not just me that needs to weigh in. And if that's a legitimate course of action that would normally be followed, then he's doing what's proper. On the one hand, he's saying, the guy's innocent, let him go. So you can debate it. Is he just going, yeah, I'm not getting anywhere, I'm just going to ditch him off? Or is this proper protocol, and I just need to send him on Herod?
If a higher court finds you not guilty, you don't send him to a lower court to appeal.
So you're on the side of Pilate's...
Yeah,
Well, was Herod over Pilate?
No, Pilate
Okay,
is
so
the,
that would be the higher court going to, but I think he was kind of.
well, Pilate's in Jerusalem, and Herod is of a region,
Right,
a tetrarch.
yeah.
So technically Herod would be, it's a different thing. It's a different thing.
I think Pilate was kind of glad it's out of my hands now.
That's
And-
the
and
other
that's-
side of it, right?
Yeah, maybe both he was
And,
glad.
and we're guessing,
Yeah, right.
because we don't have it spelled
Right.
out.
Is that not where the saying comes from, I wash my hands of
It's coming.
Yeah, it's coming.
It's coming. Wow.
Just saying that it's not a matter of one in authority between Pilate and Herod, but you got this area and I got this area, and that's not, you don't get tried for something in one state with another, they ship it
If
back.
it's their responsibility. Yeah, I think that there's some of that there, that he's trying to follow a proper protocol that they had. Whether it makes sense to us or not, or the way we do it now, is not really the issue.
Look, he's being politically correct. Number one, he doesn't really want to upset all the Jews. There's an awful lot of Jews sitting out there in his court. So if he turns Jesus back over to them, they're going to riot. And he's supposed to be keeping the peace. Secondly, if Herod is part of this responsibility, well, let's see what Herod can do with this mess, because right now I'm stuck. I see the guy's innocent, but giving him back to the Jews isn't going to solve my problem. Let's come up with another solution. So it's just a politically expedient way of taking it.
That's one view, right? And I think that we often take that view because of the way it plays out. But so far, you've seen him tackle the responsibility himself, go out to them and say, he's innocent. So he wasn't afraid to go out there and say, the guy's innocent. So, but, we know the rest of the story. Well, we gotta finish up pretty quickly here. Lori?
Well, I think there's been animosity and political intrigue and stuff between Herod and Pilate. And so this way, somewhere it says that he can please Herod by sending this guy that Herod's been trying to see and couldn't. And so I can gain a little favor.
We shall see. We're going to investigate this a little bit more and then go on to what happens in front of Herod. But next week and the week after, you have a great opportunity, not only for yourself, but to invite someone else to this Bible study who's not in here, because Pastor Kasalki is teaching about biblical interpretation.